Qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix is over and it is Lando Norris in the McLaren on pole position as Max Verstappen in the Red Bull made a fantastic recovery to be lining up alongside him. But what did we learn? Well, in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at the data and doing a data analysis from qualifying. If you enjoy the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top teams later on, so please do stick around for that. Yep, qualifying is over, and as usual in Singapore, there was a crash during the session, which this time came from Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, as it looks as though he was caught out by cold tyres, which spat him off into the wall. In general though, it looked to be very low grip, as a number of drivers were struggling for grip and performance, especially early on. There was a large amount of circuit evolution at the beginning of qualifying, and to show that, I've brought up all of the lap times set by Lando Norris during qualifying. From here, you can see that the times really came alive at the end of each session. Now, as usual, let's compare the very first lap of qualifying set by Lando and compare it to his final lap so we can see where the differences came from. When you look at the two laps, you can see that especially in the middle sector, where all the corners are, Norris in Q3 is able to get to full throttle much sooner, and therefore by the end of each straight before the braking zones, he is approximately 4 or 5 km per hour faster before hitting the brakes. This is just down to the circuit cleaning up and the tyres coming more towards the drivers by the end of qualifying. You can also see that Norris in Q3 through those final couple of corners is able to throw the car in and it just sticks. Norris was seemingly going deeper into corners during Q1 as well, and you can see that on the Delta he gains a bunch of time initially at the braking zones with the Q1 lap, but he sacrifices the exits as he's losing a lot of time, showing just how the drivers are constantly learning as well what is available to them during the laps. Altogether, from the start of Q1 to the end of Q3, Norris improved his lap time by 1.2 seconds. So we've seen how the time improved, but let's now take a look at the top speeds that the teams are able to reach, so we can see who is looking fast and who's not looking quite so fast down the straights. And what can we see here? Well, what we can see, to be honest, is that the top speed is very uniform for the majority of the field, as a lot of them are hitting either 317 or 316 km per hour. There is very little to tell between them. The slower cars were VCARB, who only hit 312 km per hour, and McLaren were surprisingly slow, only reaching 314 km per hour, much like the Alpine car. This is potentially indicating that McLaren were running the most amount of downforce as any team in the field. Let's now take a look then at the midfield, and who in the midfield impressed today? Well, it has to be said that Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas did an incredible job, and he is lining up on 6th place on the grid, and Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin is right behind him in 7th place, and they were both massively faster than their teammates, as Kevin Magnussen is 14th and Lance Stroll went out in Q1 and is starting all the way down in 17th place. Let's now compare the lap times of Hulkenberg to Alonso, so we can see how Nico just outpaced Alonso. When you take a look at these two laps, it actually started off advantage Fernando, as the Spaniard was just faster in the first sector. It looks as though here, Alonso is able to carry a little bit more apex speed compared to Nico, but as the lap begins to unfold, Hulkenberg starts to come back at Alonso. At this point here, this is for me the main turning point, as Alonso is just earlier onto the brakes and also slower. He sacrifices a bit of time then going through the final couple of corners when the tyres are screaming and struggling. Alonso just loses out a bit to Hulkenberg, and this is where the differences were, and the main difference was less than 1/10 of a second. In the race tomorrow, I anticipate in the midfield, it is going to be a very big fight between Alonso, Hulkenberg and Tsunoda, along with Alex Albon. Strategy will be vital to whoever comes out on top, and sadly for them, VCARB do tend to fall down when strategy becomes important. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about Mercedes. For Mercedes, it was a great qualifying session for Lewis Hamilton, as once again he nails a lap around this circuit and is lining up in 3rd place, and right next to him will be teammate George Russell, who managed to recover after struggling very early on in the session. And Mercedes can be very happy with this, especially after Friday where the car looked to be a real handful. Between the two Mercedes drivers, there was less than a tenth of a second. But how did Hamilton miss out against Lando? Well, let's compare the fastest lap of Norris to Lewis Hamilton. And when you look at these two laps, it's actually advantage Mercedes in the first couple of corners, as I think McLaren did sacrifice early lap performance in order to be stronger later on those soft tyres. The swing to McLaren comes at the end of Sector 1, where Norris just carries more speed at the apex at the end of Raffles Boulevard. Then through the technical second sector, where it is more low speed, we see how McLaren is just able to get the car turned better compared to Mercedes, and this is where the damage is done. For Mercedes in the race tomorrow, I think they have set themselves up nicely to potentially get one car on the podium. I don't think that they will manage this, but there is no reason why they don't finish 4th and 5th due to Ferrari having to get through the midfield. For Ferrari, Singapore was supposed to be a dominant place for them, but it completely fell away as Carlos Sainz crashed in Q3 after having too cold of tyres to open up his lap, and Charles Leclerc had a terrible final lap which ended up being deleted as his tyres were too cold as well to start the lap, and operationally this is a massive blunder from the team. On Friday they were looking very strong, but whatever changes they have made has taken the car away from the drivers, and the race tomorrow looks like it will be a very long one. Leclerc and Sainz will need to quickly move past the midfield if they want to fight Mercedes, because if not, they will probably get stuck in a DRS train, and from there, the race becomes a very long one, as they will need to wait until the pit stop phase in order to get past the midfield to finally start closing down those Mercedes cars. For Red Bull then, it was a return to normality as Sergio Perez has a terrible session and goes out in Q2, and Max Verstappen fights back to be on the front row, and Verstappen is in the perfect place and knows exactly what he needs to do at the start. Attack Norris and take the lead, then control the race, and given Norris's history from pole position, Verstappen might just do that. Let's compare then the laps of Norris to Verstappen, and when you take a look at these two laps, you can see just how back and forth it was between the two drivers, and honestly, it's a bit of a surprise. Verstappen was actually faster than Norris in the slow speed, as it looks like Red Bull have potentially fixed some of their issues in those slow speed corners, and the car does look like it's starting to work for them again over the curbs and tighter corners. As the lap opens up in the 3rd sector, Norris starts getting better traction compared to Verstappen out of those corners, potentially saying Norris had a little bit more grip left in those soft tyres. Also coming out of the final corner, it looked to me like Norris left a lot of margin on the exit, potentially meaning that there was more time in the pocket for Lando Norris. Both of these drivers are very close, and the start of the race is going to be very, very exciting. The Drivers' Championship is one nail away from being over, and if Max can nail the start, then I think he will put that final nail in the coffin for the Drivers' Championship. And finally, for McLaren, they're going to be a bit disappointed with that, as Piastri is in 5th place, and he will have to find a way past both Mercedes cars, which is going to be easier said than done, and therefore he will not be able to help Lando Norris in the fight against Max Verstappen in those opening laps, which means McLaren is going to have to think on their feet in this race, which is not always their strongest point. But how did Piastri slip away from Norris? Well, let's compare their laps, and when you look at these laps, they're actually very, very comparable until those final couple of corners. It looks as though at this point here, Piastri gets a bit of a slide, and he loses the momentum that he would have needed for those final 2 corners, and in those final 2 corners, he just can't carry the same amount of speed, and this is all it takes for him to very quickly lose 4 tenths and lose 3 places on the grid for tomorrow's race. For McLaren, they are going to need Norris to get a great start and not lose out in the first lap, because like I said, the worst thing for them will be if Verstappen can control the race, as I have a feeling he might just do that and have a very slow race in order to keep McLaren under pressure from Mercedes if Verstappen gets the jump on Lando. So with that then, what are my predictions for the Singapore Grand Prix? Well, in P5, I'm going to go for George Russell in the Mercedes. P4 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P3 will be Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. P2 will be Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. And I'm still going to go for Lando Norris to win the Grand Prix. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.